Okay, time to fill in the gaps between episode 1 and episode 2. Um, some people asked me a couple of questions here and there. I guess I could start off with do I remember anything right after my parents split? And the answer to that would be yes. Not much at that age because I think a lot of it was forced back into the back of my brain anyways. I do remember that right after the split, we would still go back to the same condo that we were in where my parents split. And our father was very bitter, couldn't be bothered with us kids, going through a divorce, I could imagine would be rough. So, but I do remember when we were younger, uh, there were certain events that I do recall. And one of them, unfortunately, was when my father actually killed my mother's kitten. Before they split, they wound up getting two kittens, Spanky and Gizmo, and cool little names, cute little kittens, little furry things. I don't really remember, personalities much because they were that tiny. But I do remember he was cleaning or vacuuming, which never happened. My dad did not clean much of anything. But he was vacuuming, and he actually that's how he killed my mom's kitten. Not his, but my mom's. He wound up killing the cat with the vacuum. Basically broke its back up against the back of the couch and pretended like it was an accident. And the rest of us were like, crying. We're kids. I vaguely remember us having to dispose of it in the garbage. And then I also sort of remember us sneaking back out to bury it in a pet cemetery that was in our neighborhood, thinking that it would, put it to rest or something. But I vaguely do remember that. So that was sort of fucked up. But he wasn't a very pleasurable guy to be around, especially after that. I do remember when I was younger, we used to go to Catholic school, or sorry, not Catholic school, CCD. I guess that's sort of Catholic school in its way. But we used to go to CCD, and I do remember making my communion, and I remember getting gifts, like little, cash in envelopes, and it was time for a visit with our father, and it was during the summertime. We used to go to the same camping ground almost every summer where the rest of my dad's family would go. Very good memories there as a kid. That was sort of like we waited all summer for that, and we could not sleep the night before. We were up. We were all excited. All of our cousins would go there at the same time. So we were all together with our family, you know, and it allowed us to escape what we were going through at that time back at home and just being around our dad by ourselves. It wasn't fun. There were some fun memories, but like I said earlier in another episode, but it wasn't really fun overall. But we would go up to this camping resort. But I do remember a time right after my communion, we pulled up to the front gate, and I remember my dad saying, well, we don't really have enough money to stay here, even though we used to stay with our grandfather and our grandmother all the time. But we don't have enough money to stay here, not unless John wants to give us, the communion money towards, us staying here. And that was literally as we're at the gate getting ready to go in. So we were going in no matter what. But me being a kid, I didn't know any better. So I forked over my $86 that I got for my communion. And I remember that because that was the most money I've ever had at that age ever. And, I forked it over because I wanted to spend time with our cousins, and I didn't know of any other way. So I gave it up. I gave it up knowing like, no, I'm not giving this up. This is, I'm not giving the opportunity of camping up, camping. But yeah, so I was like, all right, cool, we're doing this. So, but yeah, that was a memory that stuck with me, throughout life, and another reason why I strive not to be anything like him. So I mean, he was lost in his own way. But yeah, so that I do remember. Um, as for what was the other question here? Oh, what happened to the Ford? Yeah, so the Ford Explorer, actually, or Exploder, which was my very first vehicle. Technically, I didn't own it, but it was my first vehicle. I was paying my mom's note along with the car insurance just to have that vehicle. Granted, it was a complete piece of shit. It was a V8 guzzling gas. So not only on top of all these other, bullshit expenses as a younger guy trying to make it, I'm paying for an arm and a leg for gas at that time as well. But the Ford was actually sold by my stepfather, um, not with my approval because they didn't need my approval because it wasn't my vehicle. So, but they saw an opportunity to sell it along with a couple of other things. Unfortunately, that was including my big bass rig that I had, a bass guitar that I had, which I loved. That was gifted to me from my stepfather, but he took it back and sold it, along with, a couple other things, a guitar that, he made for my younger brother at the time. He sold that as well to somebody else. So there was a lot of that going on just to, try to get the monetary values because money was tight and finances were a constant problem, like I've said. So yeah, so that's what happened to the Ford, and then I was able to grab a little Mazda Protege, a little piece of shit that you'd probably have to kick off at a red light if you had a couple people in it, which, it got the job done. It was A to B, but, that middle point between losing the Ford and getting this car was tough though. Trying to find a ride, and literally have walked from my house to my job down in Fishkill, a couple of times between that because I didn't have a choice. And so yeah, so that's where the Ford went. What else here? Context on the house that I lived in. Okay, so physical context on the house. I didn't remember that I mentioned in episode 1. I think it was episode 1, where you could sort of wipe the tar off the house, on the inside. The smoke, secondhand smoke everything was yellow tinge. The windows, you could see the yellow drips on the window. It reeked of cigarette smoke, dog piss, and dog shit because they wouldn't allow us to walk the dogs. As weird as it is, our dog Abby, she wasn't terrified of being outside, but she didn't like going outside. Some dogs are like that. Coco was like that. If it was raining, she didn't want to go outside. But, they're dogs. They have to go to the bathroom outside. But they wouldn't let us walk them, and they would never walk them themselves ever. So we constantly had to clean up piss and shit inside the house, which ironically, probably not the best spot, but it would be in the kitchen. They would put these wee wee pads down, or these little training pads that are only supposed to be used just for training. They would put them down in the kitchen, covered all over the floor. So if we weren't home or if we were at school, we come home and the kitchen's full of dog piss and shit to clean up. And that was one of our many chores. So, but that was normal to us, quote unquote, like I've said. So yeah, so that's a little bit of context in the house. Living in the house, we were not allowed to take showers whenever we wanted, or probably when we should have. We were not allowed to do our own laundry when we wanted. We always had to have permission for anything, basically almost everything except for going to the bathroom. But God forbid you take too long in the bathroom or use too much water. That was a big problem too. It was always a constant, nickel and diming and a problem to regulate what we were allowed to do. And if we went a minute over, then all hell broke loose again. So, but yeah, so that's a little bit of context on the house that we lived in. What else do I have here? Let's see. Oh yeah, well, I wanted to touch on bipolar too. Bipolar disorder is very real. I'm not taking that away from anybody, and I understand for some people that are listening that maybe don't know me at all or don't know any of these people that I mentioned. But our stepfather, he has bipolar disorder, and bipolar disorder, as you know, a brief description if you don't know what it is, it's constant mood swings, behavior swings, energy swings. Like you could go from being completely energized, you could be completely shit faced tired. You have manic episodes, you have depressive episodes, and a bunch, a plethora of emotion changes and stuff like that. It is treatable though. It is treatable. It is manageable as long as you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Well, this person that I speak of never wanted to do anything of what he was supposed to be doing, never wanted to take any type of medications, just refused to help himself to help others without even thinking of anybody else. It was just about what he wanted to do and what he wanted to do only. So he didn't care about what anybody else wanted. He didn't care about how anybody else felt, or he didn't care about his effects to anybody, due to this disorder. He didn't care what anybody went through on his accord. All he cared about was himself. or cares about, really. I mean, even though he's out of my life, he is still around. But yeah. So that bipolar disorder is a real thing, and as long as you get the help that you need, then it is manageable. So, and you have to be able to want to help yourself first. So, but yeah, so I touched on that. So it doesn't excuse the behavior though, of him and what he has done and what he still continues to do, probably still to this day. So, but it doesn't excuse it at all. You know, a mental health disorder, some of them, yes, they are unmanageable, but bipolar disorder is definitely manageable. Okay. What else did I want to touch on here? Oh yeah, graduation day. While I was still living at home and I was working full time at my at Walmart, at the same time as going to school and just living a high school life. So the point came where I was graduating, and it was a tough road. There was a couple of grades where I didn't want to. I didn't I didn't want to do homework. Actually, I can say it too. Ninth grade social studies class. I failed that shit. I failed that shit horribly, but that was my own fault. I take responsibility for that because the teacher, I didn't really care for him much. He would always get on me about smelling like smoke. I was coughing like crazy. I used to have chronic bronchitis in school. I think it was due to the secondhand smoke because as soon as I moved out later in life, I haven't had a problem since at all. But I will say, smelling like dog piss and dog shit and smelling like secondhand smoke and just a straight ashtray, um, as a teacher, you're going to assume that that kid either has a rough life at home, which I don't think this guy really cared, or you just assume that they were smoking. So he would always break my chops in class, and well, what is that? A smoker's cough? You better stop smoking. I took offense to that as a young kid, and I said, you know what? Fuck you. I'm not doing your homework, even though that was my homework. I should have been doing it. I should have been making sure that that was done so I could get the passing grade. So I actually had to take 2 social studies in my last year of high school, but I did it and I passed. So I graduated high school, but on graduation day, this was also another very clear memory of me, or of mine, sorry, that when I graduated, everybody was there with their families. I was looking around for my, mom and my stepfather, and I spotted them. And this is like the first time my stepfather has left the house, in a while. Because you remember he was laid off this whole entire time, has agoraphobia, and if you don't know what that is, it's the fear of leaving your home dwelling. Like you don't want to leave home at all, even for doctor's appointments sometimes. But it's a fear. I don't know, if it's a real fear of his or if he just uses it as an excuse. I have no clue. But I will say, I was like, okay, cool. He's actually here. So I spotted them. I'm walking across stage and I'm looking for them, and I think I saw them. And then as we are all exiting, the venue, and we're all going out and meeting our families and taking pictures, I'm looking for my family. I'm like, where the fuck are they? Like, I don't see anybody. So I call them up, on my track phone, and I'm like, hey, where you at? And they were like, oh, we're on our way home. We saw you graduate. I'm like, yeah, but everybody's here with their families taking pictures. Like, where are you guys? Oh, I'm sorry. Steve just had to get out of there. He wasn't feeling comfortable, so I'm bringing him home. But we did get to see you graduate. We saw you across the stage. I'm like, yeah, but this was an important point for me, and I wanted you there to take pictures, like with everybody else. So, but thankfully, my second family, my best friend and his mom and dad and his family were there, and I spent a lot of my time that I could get outside of this house with them. And this is also the same friend where his father created the name Cinderfella for me, jokingly around. He didn't mean anything malicious by it, but it was a name that I embraced because I took something that was horrible and I turned it into something funny. And still to this day, I don't care. It still makes me laugh. But those were good, wholesome, feelings and wholesome memories with that family. So you know what? Even though my family wasn't there right then and there when I was leaving on this high of just graduating high school and all this hard work that I did as a kid against the odds that I had, I did it, and they were there to support me as my family. You know what I'm saying? So I adopted them as my second family, and I love all of them. So still to this day, they're great people. But yeah, so that was another memory that was very clear, that I remember during the shitty time. So, what else do I have here? Oh yeah. when it comes to my stepfather or Uncle Steve, when it came to the part where I mentioned in, I think it was episode 2, with the different girlfriends and different friends throughout my life, there was a lot of manipulation coming from my stepfather and making me believe certain things that were couldn't be farther enough from the truth, really. I have broken up with girlfriends at his direction. I have cut friends out my life at his direction. I've based a lot of things off of, my young decisions. Like, a lot of my younger decisions were based off of his direction, just because I was simply following what he said was the right thing to do, or, was the correct thing to do in his eyes anyways. So, I've done a lot of things, that I don't really regret now, because I did regret them, but I don't really regret them now because, again, I wouldn't be where I am today without those decisions. Didn't make them right, but I didn't know any better at that time as a younger kid, and I was just following the direction of an adult who I thought knew better. So I was guided or groomed in the wrong way to think that certain things were okay, and they weren't. And some of those people in my life were negative later on. You find out, wow, I did make a good decision. Other ones, they didn't do anything wrong. It was just immaturity at a young age, and yeah, we'll chalk it up to that. So, but yeah, there's been a lot of people that I have cut out of my life previously where I realized, okay, maybe that was the wrong decision. Some of them have entered back in, other ones haven't. So whatever is meant to be is meant to be. So, but yeah, what else is here on this list of stuff I have here? Yep. So yeah, that seems about it there for the filling in the gaps. So, oh no, there's one more thing here. So also rewind. I wish I had that sound effect, but rewind. We could go back to when my dad used to pick us up for the visits when he was still around. So what he would do, and as a bitter guy who was just going through this whole divorce and a plethora of other problems, along with car accidents here and there, health problems that he's going through, along with just drama in life in general, drug addiction as well, just a shit show of a life that he's got trying to manage at the same time as trying to keep up with visitations with these kids that don't know any better. So he would drop us off a lot though with our aunt and our grandparents, on some of the weekends. And some of the most amazing memories that I have as a kid, and with our father's visitations. And I say that loosely because a lot of the visitations we didn't spend with him, we spent them with other family on his side, on my father's side, which, like I said, a lot of those memories were great. Spending time with our cousins over in Dover Plains where they lived. And it was just a bunch of playing in the woods and just being kids. It allowed us to have that freedom to learn new things and to just have a good time, and a lot of funny memories that I could bring up in maybe in other videos and whatnot. But or reminiscing, because I know I'm going to be pulling in some family members here and there to talk about this if they're willing. So, but yeah, but there was a lot of memories. We would get dropped off at our aunt's house, and and our grandparents always used to spoil the shit out of us. I would always listen to my grandparents. They would argue here and there. I always remember my grandmother telling my grandfather to shut up all the time, but it was in like in a loving way, if that makes sense. But very old school marriage. But that's one guy in the family that still to this day I love him to death. I miss him, my grandfather, but he was more of like the father figure, the elder anyways of the group that sort of showed me my way. And just when you look at his life in general, and you learn about it through the photos and through family talking, just good people. That's who they were supposed to be. So, but yeah, so this was just a little short video I wanted to put together. Actually wound up being almost 20 minutes of just filling in the gaps. So if there's any more questions or any other comments, just shoot me a message on any of the streaming platforms that I have. This what is this? Spotify, YouTube, or Instagram. If you see a reel or not that I post, or you could just DM me anyways. If you have any more questions or anything to fill in the gaps, again, I apologize for the time hopping. I do have a bad habit of that, and I also have a bad habit of saying I don't know how many times you could count I say that, but I can't help it. So So yeah, I will see you guys on the next one, and hopefully you're enjoying what you hear so far. All right. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe if you haven't already. Peace.